Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I am Melissa Van Hook, Chair of the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council and Chair of the Council's Meaningful Careers Committee. I am also the proud mother of two boys with autism. Oh, I must start by correcting myself. My two sons are now young men. My oldest, Kyle, is in college, and my youngest, Dane, is in high school and plans to attend college. Soon, both of them will be in the phase that we refer to as transition to young adults. Like many of you, I've been on a journey learning about what services my sons can receive, what's best for them, and how to navigate through the system. During that journey, I've become extremely passionate about transition and competitive integrated employment. I want to see successful outcomes for all children, youth, and young adults with disabilities. Vocational rehabilitation programs are intended to provide services that enable individuals with disabilities to pursue meaningful employment that corresponds with their interests and abilities. VR counselors can join a transition team and attend individualized education planning or IEP planning meetings before a student leaves high school. So, VR offers important programs that can be beneficial to students with disabilities who may be leaving high school without employment skills or who are already out of high school and finding it difficult to keep a job without additional training. VR counselors first assess a student's eligibility for VR services. Once it is determined that a young person is eligible to receive services, a VR counselor is assigned to work with them. Ideally, students and their counselors will develop an individual plan for employment, or IPE, that identifies which VR services are needed. And guess what? Families can participate in this process. Unfortunately, this ideal process does not always happen. The system has failed some individuals and needs to improve. We need the agency to be the best it can be so that it can provide individuals with optimal service. The staff need to be properly trained on the service options, be knowledgeable about innovative programs, and be willing to think outside the box when necessary. And although much of the responsibility for this ultimately rests with VR, we as a community must play a significant role as well. And families are a huge part of that. School districts can also improve the process, but that is a topic for another day. Through these webinars, we want to work with you to develop a roadmap for how we can better create meaningful careers for people with developmental disabilities. We believe that working together, we can find and help them find employment that realizes their potential and allows them to be meaningful contributors in the workforce. Our goal is to inform Arizona stakeholders about what it takes to develop a statewide system of support for individuals we serve by bringing together a group of content experts in one place. Wow. Now, that's a goal that I think we can all buy into. And how will we realize it? Together, one step at a time, by providing resources, ideas, and tools via these webinars. Excuse me. And before we move ahead, as you know, no one undertakes this journey alone. So please allow me to take a moment to acknowledge our wonderful partners in this work. We couldn't do it without the Arizona Association of People Supporting Employment First, APSE chapter, the Arizona Center for Disability Law, Arizona Employment First, Northern Arizona University's Institute for Human Development, the University of Arizona Sonoran University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, and of course, the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. What a powerhouse of talent and support. In just a minute, we're going to start our second webinar, the critical role VR plays in the transition process and beyond. Let's learn about how VR can assist us with the transition process. What services do they provide? How do they partner with schools and other employment providers to assist people with disabilities? Now, let me introduce you to an awesome individual from Vocational Rehabilitation, Betty Schoen. Betty has worked for the Department of Economic Security since 1986, where she began as a temp and worked for other divisions before joining Rehabilitation Services Administration in 1999. Currently serving as a regional transition specialist for RSA's Vocational Rehabilitation Program, Betty first began working as a vocational rehabilitation counselor with high school students with disabilities in 2000. Betty's favorite aspect of her job is providing resources to students, educators, and other transition partners to help youth with disabilities prepare for meaningful, productive, and satisfying careers. We will have a Q&A session after Betty's presentation. And now let us hear from Betty Schoen.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I really appreciate your your kind words, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this information with all of you today. Excuse me. So we're going to talk about creating that successful career path with vocational rehabilitation as your partner. And if you would advance the slide, please. So we'll talk about what VR is. We'll review the referral process, the intake process, the eligibility process. This is a government service, so yes, there are processes aplenty. We'll also talk about the types of services that vocational rehabilitation provides. And just a caveat to that, VR services are individualized to the person receiving them. So just because one person receives service X doesn't mean the other person will receive service X as well. It's all based on disability related needs. And we will cover a few resources for exploration of careers. And I see that Miriam has a raised hand. So would somebody give me Miriam's question, please?
Yes, Betty. Miriam is saying she does not have VR services and she would like to reapply for vocational rehabilitation.
And thank you, Miriam. That is definitely possible. And this presentation will tell you how to do that. You can also contact me. My contact information is at the end of this presentation. I am always glad to facilitate a referral to VR. So we can talk later, okay? Thank you so much. Okay, please advance. So what is vocational rehabilitation? Advance. Voc Rehab is an employment program. And I need to emphasize that our bottom line is employment. And it's for people who have a documented disability that creates a barrier to employment. And those individuals require VR services to help them prepare for, get, or keep employment. So that's the definition of vocational rehabilitation. Next. Here's the process, all the W's and one H, the when, where, who, how, and we will talk about services for individuals who might need additional supports. If I don't cover that when we're in that process or in that section of the PowerPoint, please give me a poke to remind me. Please advance. An individual can come to VR as a high school student. We began serving at age 14. And Kim, I'll talk about those specific services in just a couple of minutes, in a couple of slides. We'll talk about that. So at any point in the high school experience, when the youth is ready to address their career goals. So they have to be willing to be looking at, well, what do I want to do as a career after high school, and devote some time and energy to that process. They have to be willing to work with the VR counselor to identify their career interests as well as their functional limitations or their challenges to employment. And then we expect that young people will participate in career exploration activities, even if they think they know what they want to do as an adult for their career. And there's all kinds of other activities that will help them get ready to go to work. And so we expect that they will be participating in a bunch of different services during their time with Voc Rehab. Next slide. So for an adult, the referral to VR would come when the disability creates that barrier to employment. So perhaps they had no disability initially, and then they developed diabetes. Their diabetes wasn't well managed, and now it's really impacting their vision, or it's impacting their ability to walk, or because of neuropathy, or they just are struggling to manage their blood sugar, and that's sapping a lot of their time. So there's any number of times when an adult might go from having a disability that doesn't create a barrier to that disability providing the barrier, or by accident or illness developing a barrier to employment. So it's at the point when those things impact their ability to prepare for, get, or keep employment. And we can provide services to help an individual maintain their current employment. So why don't you advance, please? Individuals can refer themselves to VR, especially if they're an adult, or they can be referred by their high school, by another agency that they participate with, like the Division of Developmental Disabilities or their behavioral health clinic. Maybe they're referred to VR by the foster youth provider agency that they receive services from. We really don't care where that referral comes from. We do use a common referral form, and it is a referral form. It is not an application. The referral form is usually accompanied by a release of information for a student under 18, or if that student is under guardianship and is 18 or older, we would need the referral, the release of information from the parent or guardian. You typically will make the referral to the desired VR offices, and we have VR offices all over the state. In Phoenix area, there are some 12, I believe. In the Tucson area, there are probably 6 to 9 different offices. And then most counties have at least one VR office that would serve the entire county or serve a number of areas within that county. The other documents that verify the disability could include a psychoeducational evaluation in the case of a school student with an IEP, the latest IEP for that student, and other medical documentation. So doctor's statements that confirm the diagnosis and how that diagnosis impacts the individual. It could come from their behavioral health service provider. There's any number of ways that we can get that documentation of disabilities. Next slide, please. After we receive a referral form, we are going to reach out to the individual and schedule an intake appointment that goes with an orientation that will cover, just what is VR, all of the usual rules and all that kind of stuff and kind of explain everything. At the present moment, we are doing everything virtually or by telephone. But in July, VR is supposed to go back to in-person services, and our counselors will be participating in a hybrid manner from their local offices. So they may not be in the local office all of the time. They may still work from home and may still work with you virtually, but they can also do services in person. So that's good news. And I know lots of people will be very happy to hear that. The vocational rehabilitation orientation is part of the intake meeting. So we talked to you about all of the different little nuances of VR and the rules and the expectations and those kinds of things. During the intake, the VR counselor is going to ask you lots of questions because we need to answer the questions that we have regarding your disability, how it impacts you, and the needs that you have associated with your career goals. That VR counselor will read the documents that you provide and talk to you about how your disability impacts you in your daily life activities. Next. When it comes to determining eligibility for vocational rehabilitation, we look at the documentation that you provide. So if you leave something important out, we won't have all of the information that we need to make that decision. We're going to use medical and psychological documents. So if your child, say, has a learning issue as well as a physical issue, we need to know about both of them. They have ADHD, but they also have significant asthma. We need information about both of those conditions. If the information that you provide us is not sufficient for either eligibility or planning for employment needs, we're going to pay for additional evaluations. So perhaps that's a neuropsychological evaluation because the individual sustained a brain injury, and that may be complicating matters. We need that information. Perhaps it's a new psychological evaluation because the individual is 5 years out of high school and the last evaluation they had was in high school. We will engage a psychologist to provide that psychoeducational evaluation. There's a number of different evaluations that we might require, and we pay for them all. And we are tasked with making that eligibility determination within 60 days, unless you are coming to us from a behavioral health clinic, in which case we have 30 days to make that decision, or best practice for those transition-aged youth is to make that decision within 30 days or less as well. So next question, or next slide. We do have a means of determining an order of selection, and that's just a fancy way of saying a prioritization system. We talk with each applicant about how their disability impacts 7 major life areas. Those major life areas are things like communication, mobility, interpersonal skills, self-determination or direction, self-care, work tolerance, and work skills. We identify what category you fall in under our three-pronged prioritization system, but we do not have a wait list. So priority is based on the number of areas impacted among those 7, and then the number of VR services needed to address impacts. At this point, I know that there have been a number of questions I've seen pop up. Do we want to take a minute and address some of those questions?
Yes, Betty, we can do that real quick. I know you'll probably get to it later. We still have a question about a buddy for work, how that works. There was a question specifically about assistance with driver education or modifications to the vehicle. Do you want to talk about that now, or does that come up later?
Yeah, let me just talk about the buddy for work. And if it's truly a coworker that's serving as your mentor or serving as your support person or your go-to person when you have questions or have a difficulty, we refer to that as a natural support. If you need a job coach for work, that is a little different. We can work with the employer to establish that work buddy, that mentor, that would be your go-to person. But if you need a job coach to help you get stabilized in employment, we can provide a certain amount of that for adults, and we can provide up to 4 years of those services for a transition aged youth who has gained their career goal employment and needs job coaching for stabilization. Once that individual is stabilized in employment, then we turn that ongoing job coaching, if needed, over to either their developmental disabilities support coordinator or their behavioral health case manager. Those are the only 2 programs that we can work with because they're both under the Arizona long-term care, and they get their dollars from Medicaid services. As far as driver education and the modifications that a vehicle might need to allow for an individual to drive, the evaluation is one thing, and we would have to determine that there is a reason that the individual needs to have a driving assessment to determine what kind of services they might need to be able to learn to drive safely. Do they need modifications, or is it just a different type of instruction or additional time to learn the skill to be safe on the road? That's one thing, that assessment. And then during that assessment, they will also develop or determine what modifications a vehicle might need. Is it a spinner knob because they have limited use of one or the other of their arms? Is it hand controls? What is needed in that vehicle modification? What was some of the other questions?
Okay, Miriam asked, can I receive VR services if I graduated from high school 2 years ago?
Definitely. If you are eligible, just because you graduated 2 years ago doesn't mean you can't. We start at age 14, but there is no age limit to how long or how old you can be and still receive VR services. Even if you're 75, if you need to go to work, want to go to work, and you have disabling conditions that make it difficult for you to do so, you can come and ask for VR services.
Okay. Follow up to that one, same asker, Miriam asked, thank you. I receive behavioral health services from Teros Health. Does VR need a letter of release? She is seeking VR services right now.
Okay, so in the Access Regional Behavioral Health Care Providers, we have VR counselors that staff each clinic, and you can talk to your case manager about referring you to the VR counselor that staffs your clinic. And the VR counselor and the clinic should know what kind of documentation you would need to be able to be referred to VR. So I would imagine there's a release of information involved, because your counselor and your case manager will need to communicate with one another.
Okay, sorry about the ringing phone there. Ashley asked, what is the average frequency of clients referred out for services per month?
Oh, that's way above my pay level. I'm sorry. I don't know.
That's correct. So, but a good question. Ember asked, what happens if youth does not get to the career goal employment until right before aging out of transition age? Will they still receive 4 years of support from a job coach?
We do not expect that an individual will reach their career goal immediately upon graduation. Most youth need at least a year's worth of services in order to prepare for their career goal, perhaps unless they attended a career and technical education program during their high school years that gave them the skills and training that they needed to go right to work in their career goal. So we typically figure that we're going to have to provide some kind of services for them to be able to reach their career goals, and some kind of job coaching to help them get stabilized on the job. Up to the age of 24, we provide that 4 years, or to the age of 24. If they reach the age of 24 before they get employed, there are other standards for how much job coaching we can provide to stabilize the individual. And I keep saying stabilize because that's the purpose of job coaching after the individual gains their employment. If they need more than the usual limit of job coaching, we will approach that individually by the individual's, according to the individual's need, and look at policy and involve our management team in making those decisions.
Okay, thank you, Betty. We have a whole bunch more questions. So
let's go on.
Okay.
And then we'll go back to questions in a few minutes, okay? Because I want to be conscientious about our time. And so why don't you advance the slide, please? So this is the document. The Individualized Plan for Employment is the document that creates all the magic. If you want magic, and if you don't, well, it creates a plan. This is where we identify the actual career goal or occupational goal for the individual. We talk about what services they will need to get to their goal. We talk about the objectives that they must achieve, or the steps that they must go through to reach their goal, and then give approximate timelines for going through the services and achieving those steps to prepare them to then look for that job and enter employment. So in the development of that plan, even if you're an adult, you may need to participate in career exploration activities. If you can't return to the kind of work that you were doing prior to your disability, we need to look at what kind of transferable skills you have, and then assess how those might fit in another vocation where you can use those skills in a manner that allows you to achieve employment, doing something within your set of strengths, within your interests, something that goes along with your work style, that appeals to your work values and uses your work skills. Usually with kids, with our younger population, they need that career exploration because they may have ideas about what they want to do, but unless they have thoroughly explored that career, they really may not know enough about that occupation to make a good decision about whether or not it's a good match for them. The activities of plan development can also include those work readiness activities. Individuals need to learn the expectations of work. What do employers look for in a good employee? If you've never worked before, you may need some work-based learning activities to even figure out, what does working look like for me? What do I like? What don't I like? Those are all important things to learn about. You need to identify that career goal that meets your individual needs, interests, strengths. You need to identify the services that will relate to the things that you are challenged by. What kind of accommodations might you need? Will there be assistive technology that you might need? And this is to be able to work successfully. And then you need to take those steps, including preparation for employment. And preparation can include some kind of training. Maybe it's college, maybe it's some kind of vocational training, maybe it's on-the-job training, perhaps it's an apprenticeship program. It just depends on what you want to do and your needs. So I saw a question flash by about covering college. We do pay for tuition. We limit that tuition to what's needed to reach your goal. If your goal does not require college, then we will not pay for college. But we can encourage you to file a free application for federal student aid, or a FAFSA, and apply for the free money, the Pell Grant, that the government offers to those who qualify economically. We will require everyone to apply for a FAFSA before we pay for college. So if you qualify for Pell Grant, we use that first. If you don't qualify for Pell Grant, we can pay for your tuition. So there's lots of different policies and ins and outs, and I can't cover all of that in this short presentation, but we work through all of those questions during the development of your individualized plan for employment. So next, please. And yes, we can assist with the FAFSA application process, but there's also College Depot, and they provide that assistance, as well as the financial departments at any university or community college. They will help with that process as well. So this is just a visual interpretation of the VR process, kind of an arrow saying these are the steps that you have to take to go from application to getting hired. And it is a process. It's not short. Woohoo! We just lost our presentation. So perhaps, Jeff, if you want to get that back, I would sure appreciate it.
Yep, working on it. Sorry,
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Betty, while he's working on it, this is a great question really quick. I
Okay.
get this a lot, so important. Can a person qualify for VR without DDD recognition? Meaning,
Oh,
do they have to have
yes.
DDD?
No, you do not have to be a DD member or qualify for DDD. We recognized all kinds of disabilities, all types, not just the 4 that DDD covers. So it can be a mental health diagnosis. It can be a brain injury. It can be a chronic disease like sickle cell anemia or diabetes or MS. It can be a learning issue, an intellectual disability. Any number of disabling conditions will qualify for vocational rehabilitation services. But there also has to be a barrier to employment. So that's the key, the diagnosis and the existence of a barrier to employment. So hopefully that answered the question, and let's motor down the road. So transition services, we're going to talk just a little bit, if you advance, to how can we help those young people. So the first thing that we can provide is pre-employment transition services. These are available for students with disabilities of any kind between the ages of 14 and 22, and they do not have to be VR clients to get this specific service. It is a 5 different workshop service. An individual, a student, can get 1, 2, 4, all 5. It doesn't matter how many they ask for. We have a total of 22 service providers in the state of Arizona for this service. The workshops are meant to be general in nature on each of these topics. Each provider does different subtopics under each of these 5 topic areas, and they have to be at least 2 hours in duration. I think the next slide has a little more information.
And Betty, I'm just going to chime in here and say that we have about 7 minutes left.
Oh my, okay, then we
Yeah.
better motor on down the road. These services are available, as I said, to students age 14 to 22. Students don't have to be our clients. We have those paid contractors that we use. Those services can be provided by a school working with a contractor during the school day on the school campus if they choose, or outside of the school day off campus somewhere. And you just have to request the services, and students can include GED students, can include students in college, students in a vocational program, as well as any kind of a high school or secondary education program. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. These are some additional types of transition services. And just so you know, all 5 of those topic areas within the pre-employment transition services have mirror services in VR that fully cover that particular topic. So if you received a 2-hour job exploration workshop, you can get a full career exploration service as a VR client that will do way more than the 2-hour workshop you got under pre-employment transition service, but you have to be a VR client. So this just gives you some different samples, counseling about the job training options, assistive technology, could it be an evaluation, provision of the technology, training on how to use the technology. Vocational counseling and guidance is something that our VR counselors who have to have some kind of college preparation for being a VR counselor. We have 3 different levels of counselors, and the highest level are individuals like myself who are certified rehabilitation counselors with a master's level education in rehabilitation counseling and have that certification that they attained through passing a very difficult test. Okay, let's go down to the next. And I hope I included a question response. So resources for career exploration. That's one of my favorite things to do. And these are just some of the things that you need to think about when you're thinking about work. You need to think about what's important to you to find a job satisfying. It gives you a website where you can go and just look at different work values and consider, is that something important to me or not? Knowing your style, what your preferences are. This can impact how well you might perform a job. It also gives you a website where you can go and look at the definition of work styles and develop an understanding of your own work style. Work skills, the things you know how to do, that's very important. And even if you're just a high school student, you have developed work skills that will be important for you as you move forward with your career goals. Things like your communication skills, things like your technology skills.
Hey, buddy,
Listening.
you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I don't know how many slides I have left, but I think I'm almost done. Okay, next slide. Interest inventories are a great way to kind of pinpoint the general occupational cluster that contains the things that most interest you. This gives you websites where you can do a lot of different exploration activities and identify that cluster and then dive down into that cluster to identify different occupations, individual occupations that involve those interests that you've identified. So those are important career exploration activities. Next. And then we have a new resource from the Arizona Community of Practice on Transition. Next. It's a virtual resource guide called Navigating Life Transitions. And it's all about who's going to help you with your child or your own transition journey. This is a wonderful new web-based guide, and it's from the Arizona Community of Practice on Transition in partnership with a whole bunch of other organizations to help those students with disabilities and their families. And let me tell you, it can be good for adults as well, because there's lots of resources in this guide. So I don't have time to go to the website, but you can access it from the PowerPoint when you get the PowerPoint. Next. Okay, I think I've used those 2 minutes and now it's time for more questions.
Okay, Betty, thank you. We do have a number of questions in here. I'm going to go back to a couple. Okay, did a great job covering about half of them. So from an individual with an intellectual disability who does not communicate verbally, is VR able to support this type of individual?
Yes. We believe in employment first. In fact, Arizona is an employment first state, which means not that it's a service or someplace you go to, it's a philosophy about how anyone can achieve employment goals. And we will look at the individual, what they want to do, what supports they need in order to allow them to work, and what preparation they need, and help them to match their goals with some kind of employment. And we provide the supports to help them get there. They don't have to work full-time. We do not tell people how much they have to work. We allow the individual to decide what's appropriate for me, my needs, my abilities. And yes, before they start a day treatment program or some kind of supported employment through the Division of Developmental Disabilities, we want them to come to us so we can help assess their employment needs and what we can do to help them move forward.
Okay, thank you, Betty. Next question. What if you have a visual impairment and do not have it documented?
We do have rehab counselors for the blind and visually impaired. They can do assessments that can identify what's going on with your eyeballs and help provide that documentation of disability, and then determine eligibility based on the documentation and your needs.
Okay, thank you. What agency should a VR client contact to obtain a behavioral health case manager?
Well, if you receive your behavioral health services through Access, that would be the first place to start. If you are an Access client or recipient and you are in need of behavioral health services, go to your Access customer service number and get set up with a regional behavioral health authority and assigned to a clinic. And then that clinic would help you access VR services. Did that answer the question?
I think it did. If not, they can post again in the chat. So I will ask you the next question here. If your career choice is only taught online in Pima Community College and due to your disability, it is difficult for you to learn this way, how would a VR member request funds to attend, for example, Pima Medical Institute?
We look at what's needed by the individual, what's available to provide that need, and then we will base our decision on what's required. So if you can't learn effectively online and the only other opportunity is to go to a for-profit educational institution, we can look at that. Now, there is a policy that states that if we send you to that vocational institution, you may need to pay the difference between the public institution and the private institution in terms of tuition. But that is a policy decision, and that would be covered by your VR counselor. If you're not having success getting in touch with your VR counselor and getting answers to that question, please go through the unit supervisor of that individual and ask to have that discussion about how you can get your training needs met at an institution that's different from the public one.
Okay, thank you, Betty. And by the way, you did answer Kim's question regarding behavioral health case management, so thank you so much.
Okay.
Amber asked for clarification on VR services, specifically when you're talking about barriers. Is it a barrier to any employment or a barrier to a career goal employment?
It's the barrier to the career goal. I mean, if you could work at McDonald's, you wouldn't need accommodations to work at McDonald's, but that's not what you want to do. Maybe you want to be a school teacher and you have some barriers to that. Remember, it's the barrier to preparing for getting or keeping employment. That counts. And we would look at, what do you want to do? What is your career goal? How do you need the help in reaching that goal?
Okay, but if they wanted to work at McDonald's and they had barriers to working there, VR
Yes.
absolutely would support that individual. So
Oh, definitely.
that answers it. Okay, thank you. Henriette asked, Pathways to Employment is a new career training program for students and young adults. What are the differences between pre-employment transition services and Pathways to Employment?
Is Pathways to Employment the service under the Division of Developmental Disabilities?
I'm pretty sure it is.
I have not seen the description of that program, so I really couldn't answer that off the top of my head, but you can email me. I can get that information, and then I can provide you with that information about what the differences are.
Okay, and for the record, Betty's email is in the chat at 10:52 a.m. It's the last comment in there. So Kim Taylor asked, my daughter completed a few of the pre-ETS workshops when COVID began, and they were done virtually. Now that providers are offering the workshops in person, could she attend?
And I'm going to say yes. And what we would look at is, what is the need for each of the workshops that you're requesting? And will it be a different subtopic under that main topic that will be provided in person? Because we know that as children grow, their needs differ. And so just because they had the service, say, as a freshman, that wouldn't mean that it would address the needs that they have as a junior. So needs change, and therefore pre-ETS can be provided for those new or different needs.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers that. All right, you covered just about every question, but there was one in here asked by Cheryl, that is, what is a 515 or 505 letter DTA?
Okay, that is a process for individuals who are DD members and who have come to VR because we're the place they have to go in order to be qualified to receive group supported or center-based employment services from DDD. They have to be determined ineligible for vocational rehabilitation services before the division can provide them group supported or center-based employment. So the 505 and 511 are letters that are part of that process that provide DDD with the documentation that they need per the Workforce Innovations and Opportunities Act to have those services provided by the division.
Hey, Betty, you got 1 minute left for questions.
Okay, I'm going to clarifications here. Kelly Thompson said Pathways to Employment Services specifications have not yet been finalized through DDD. The Melissa Gonzalez, if your career choice is only taught online in Pima Community College and due to your disability, it is difficult. Okay, we already covered that one. You talked about it. That was reposted, but you discussed that. We currently provide ESS and DTA programs for adults with IDDs. Is there a way to become a Voc Rehab provider through our existing program, or to partner with an already existing program?
For which service?
Well, let's see. They provide ESS and DTAs. You can become, I don't know the answer. Is there a way to become a Voc Rehab provider through our existing program? It would depend which contract they want to go after.
Yeah, it depends on which contract, because some of them are under knowledge services and they go through a different process than others. So pre-ETS right now is a service that has to go through our Office of Procurement rather than the knowledge services process for managed service providers. So it's two different processes, and depending upon which service you want to have a contract for, that determines which way you have to get that.
Okay, thank you. And Jessica, as far as ask a specific person to contact for that, you could reach out to contracts@RSA-VR and you can find them. Okay, so I'm sorry, we've got to wrap up because we have just 2 minutes here. I'm going to, two things. There's a link. Jason, if you could post it again in the chat for an evaluation for today's webinar. If you could please take a minute and give us some feedback and fill out that evaluation. It'll just take a minute or two. And then thank you for today. I'm going to introduce really quickly Lori Sandine. She's the co-chair for the Arizona APSE chapter, and she would like a moment of your time. Lori?
Thanks so much, Melissa and Betty, and this was fantastic, and it's a great lead into what Arizona APSE is, which we're a group of volunteers, professionals, parents, advocates who want to move employment first or competitive integrative employment throughout the state of Arizona. And if you're interested in joining and helping and facilitating that, this is our information. I put our website in the chat. We also thank you guys so much for attending today and encourage you guys to attend and register for our June 9th webinar, which is called Yes, Your Child Can Attend College, Supporting Inclusive College Transition Practices. So we did kind of employment today, and then we're going to hit on education next time. So that's again, June 9th. We appreciate, be sure to take the feedback form, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Betty. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing all of that information today. We really appreciate it. And if people have questions that didn't get answered, please reach out to Betty on her email, and she'll see if she can help you with that or point you in the right direction. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.